Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's webinar from One Click LCA about reducing embodied carbon, where we look at how you can take the necessary steps or what is required from strategy to project. And we have two companies here, Goodman and List Eco, and Sebastian and Rebecca, their representatives, who will also be in this webinar today. But let's just maybe give 1 more minute for a few more people to join before we take it forward. All right, a couple of more people coming in. That's great to see. One more thing to request all of you would be, at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to use there's a questions tab there that you see that you can just add them into, so that we could cover this at the end of the session. But yeah, super nice and lovely to see. Well, hopefully you also hear us quite well as well. But thank you all for joining in. I think we can already begin now. So again, thank you everyone for joining this One Click LCA webinar. My name is Aditi, as you see on the left, and I have two people joining in for today's webinar. One is Sebastian Tyson, and the other one is Rebecca Lamas, who are both from, each one from Goodman and List Eco themselves. And maybe if I can ask Sebastian and Rebecca to give a short introduction of themselves, maybe just a minute or so.
Yeah, please, Rebecca, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So Rebecca Lamas, working for Goodman Continental Europe within the Sustainability and Innovation team. Thanks to One Click LCA for organizing this webinar. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Sebastian Tyson. I'm from List Eco, one of the managing partners. I work since 2015 with LCA, especially for building services equipment and BIM. And yeah, thanks that we can present some insights of this project here today.
Great, thank you both. So just one short introduction about myself. My name is Aditi, and for the next couple of slides, I'll just take you forward to introduce you a bit about One Click LCA, what we do, and so on. So if I just move ahead to give you some idea about One Click LCA, we are a company which is headquartered from Finland, and we have now more than 200 employees. The software is actually used on a lot of projects, as you see over here, so more than 50,000 of them. And it's also used globally across the world in more than 150 countries. What also sets us apart is the robust database that we have, which consists of more than 150,000 plus data sets, and then also the integrations with BIM as well. And we have a lot of different architects, manufacturers, contractors all around the world using One Click LCA to help them make informed decisions about their projects. So again, a brief short overview. Here you can see we work mainly on the construction as well as the manufacturing side, by providing the software to different stakeholders across the entire construction industry to help them in, moving forward towards their net zero carbon commitments, as well as for helping them communicating transparently about their construction materials, so EPDs that are required and then are used on the building projects or infrastructure projects themselves. So we do provide a lot of a different number of range of tools, as you can see, and also those that require compliancy as well. This is something that you can have from the one-click LCA software. Just to give you a brief background about life cycle assessment, so this is something that also helps quantify and reduce the impacts. So it is a reliable, standardized, and a science-based tool. And as many of you know that have joined here, LCA is more and more required in a lot of different regulations. So specific to Europe, there are many of them within the different countries that are now coming up. And overall, EU-wide, for example, you have those for France, for Netherlands, and for the Nordic countries and UK, for example. And then LCA is another main aspect and quite important for different building certifications as well. So there are more than 100 plus such type of certifications that require or award when you provide them with LCA reports. Specifically, or when you use EPDs in these different assessments. And the third and the most important one that is currently being, asked more and more is the buyer demands. So a lot of buyers now require projects to have life cycle assessments done. As you can see, almost 76% of B2B buyers prioritize getting transparent communication, as well as helping them see which ones are sustainable products and which ones are not. And that's quite a big portion of those. So this is being required and asked for more and more across not just Europe, but even globally as well. Just also a small background, so about LCA and what standards does it follow. So you can see here that the main standards that it also complies with on buildings and materials is the EN, one specific to Europe, which looks at then the different life cycle stages that you can see at the bottom part. And then for EPDs, so EPDs would basically be environmental product declarations. These are for construction materials, but they can, of course, be published on various different environmental databases. But again, the approach or the principal standards that they follow are, as you see over here, EN 15804 and ISO 21930. But there are so many different program operators around the world where you can have these EPDs published, really, as long as they have these standards that they follow. That's mainly the most important criteria. But here was just a short summary about one-click LCA and the basics of the buildings and the EPD level, so product level. I will now hand it over to Rebecca, maybe from Goodman, to then take it forward on how they have been utilizing LCAs specific to the project.
Thanks a lot, Aditi. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, Rebecca Lamas again here for Goodman. I'm perhaps stepping back a little bit about Goodman. We are a global specialist in logistics and data center real estate in the market for more than 2 decades. My footprint has been quite short so far, but very fruitful in the past 4 years in the sustainability and innovation team within continental Europe. We are a team of currently 8 colleagues in the sustainability team at continental Europe, within 200 colleagues around the continent. So what do we do? Being a specialist in logistics and data center real estate, what does that mean? So mainly 3 key pillars that we develop, we own, and we manage those assets in 6 countries within continental Europe and globally. I will show quickly in which regions we are present. I would just like to focus on one key point here, is that we aim at developing in core locations only. Qualitative buildings, and we develop to keep them in portfolio. As I was mentioning before, we are present in different regions. We can see on the left-hand side, we are present in 5 key regions, headquartered in Sydney, in Australia. I am sitting in the headquarters for Europe, continental Europe, in Belgium. We are also present in Asia, New Zealand, Brazil, the US, and the UK. So whenever I say we, our strategy, it's more specifically on the right-hand side on continental Europe. Yeah, logistics and data centers, and also in the description of this webinar, it was mentioned large buildings, and so I would wonder myself how large. So we can go from last mile delivery centers of around from 5,000 square meters, it could be, to light industrial parks, to even standard and large logistic buildings, so 100,000, 150,000 square meters even, from single story to multi-story, more and more, 2, 3, 4 multi-story, 2 levels of multi-story logistic centers, and also data centers. Now let's start deep diving on our commitments, more specifically in terms of sustainability. Very talked recently, science-based targets, as you might have seen in the news. I'm not getting into that level of detail, but talking more specifically about our commitment. Goodman, continental Europe, as well as globally, we are committed to science-based targets. So let's deep dive here on our CE, continental Europe targets to reduce scope 1 and 2 by 70% by 2030, and scope 3, which is 99% of our impact, we are aiming to reduce it by 55% by 2030. Also, some great news that we're very excited about. We are also committed to net zero since very recently it was confirmed by SBT. Now, yeah, whenever we committed in 2021, we would talk about 2030. It seemed like it was too far, even though we see nowadays, today in 2024, it's around the corner. But we did see the need to have a halfway milestone. So 2019 was our baseline. Our halfway milestone, we decided to be 2025, which is literally tomorrow, where we were aiming to reduce at least 30% of CO2 equivalent emissions in scope 3, and always having in mind, well, the more the better in terms of reductions, because, well, let's keep in mind the 2030 ultimate reduction of 55% of CO2 equivalent reduction by 2030. And how do you know how much is your carbon footprint, how much you can and you are reducing? So that's where accounting comes to play. And for example, the case of the software of One-Click LCA, that we've been having this partnership for 2 years, and we have all our life cycle assessments placed in the platform of One-Click LCA for an easier comparison, because as much as we want to simplify and understand and generalize, you need to be looking every single building and with its own details and specifications. So good to compare, but yeah, no single solution for all. So the first step is to measure. For us, the second and foremost important step is to reduce that impact. And so here, that's where we're looking at least 30% of reduction by 2025 practical completion buildings, and 55% by 2030. We also very much believe and defend the mitigating beyond the value chain with high value quality carbon credits. Um, but I'm not getting into that level of detail today. We're focusing today on number two, on reducing, putting those strategies and commitments into real projects. I'm all right. So we talked about reducing scope three. It's a 99% of our full impact. We talked embodied, we talk operational. So how does our developments in our baseline look like? It looks like more or less like this if we oversimplify. So we can see the impact of embodied carbon overall of our developments in our baseline could be around 60% of the whole LCA and operational around 40%. As you know, this can be this is a moving target and moving figure as well. It depends on the renewables procured, the refurbishments, embodied carbon that you'll be having in place and not. So those are considerations with standard and EPD data within 60 years. If we start looking at operational carbon, how do we aim at reducing the operational carbon? Very easy, theoretically, but in practice. So we look at supply side and demand side. We have different tenants occupying those assets. So we are not occupiers of our real estate assets. So scope three, it all falls, the operational carbon of those assets fall into scope three for us. On the supply side, very much maximizing solar panels installed on the roof. We also look at other renewable solutions. For example, for the case of Bremen, the project that we're going to talk about today, also looking at wind turbines mounted on the roof. We also prioritize on-site PPAs with our tenants, so producing those renewables resources on-site and prioritizing consumption on-site. And also we have green leases in place, so we support and together with our tenants, we aim at maximizing procurement of green electricity on-site whenever the on-site production cannot meet the full demand. On the right side, we see the demand, so the preparedness of our buildings to deploy a low carbon operation is really looking at having only energy efficient appliances, and here big shout out on heat pumps. And then also always monitoring and optimizing the consumption on site, so having smart buildings in place. Now, let's look at the embodied carbon emissions. This is how our baseline looked like. And here, perhaps there's a lot of information, but I would like to focus on one, which is the upfront embodied carbon. And what is the upfront embodied carbon? Is all the carbon emitted during the construction up to the construction phase when it's finalized, before we turn on that first light of the building. And so it's the whole phase A, from A1 to A5. We see here the materials used. Again, this is data from our baseline 2019. Was more than 70% of the embodied carbon. And the construction phase, A4 and A5, almost 10. So we're talking about more than 80% of the embodied carbon of our warehouses developed in our baseline 2019 were on the upfront, so before the operation of that building. So that is the importance of the material and construction system choices, because before you start operating, you have already emitted the greatest majority. And so if we deep dive a little bit more on the upfront embodied carbon, on that phase A1 to A5, we can see here which building elements are the most impactful ones. So the highest one would be the superstructure. So we're talking about here the columns and the beams, the substructure as well, the slab foundation, external works, and etc. etc. So this gives us a hint already where to be focusing our actions to reduce embodied carbon. So we know where to focus, and then the question is, well, so what are the solutions for that superstructure, substructural external areas? What are the different choices that you should be making? So the first one is actually not to use materials, so to optimize material quantities. The other one is to think out of the box in terms of material choices for your structural elements, which is overall great majority throughout Europe, those type of buildings done with full concrete. So, well, let's start, thinking about hybrid solutions, perhaps steel, timber, to differentiate and not just deploy full concrete in structural elements. Also thinking about other options like organic insulation and reusing materials that you might be finding on site if it's a brownfield development or a nearby. So always keep in mind there is no one solution fits all. I think if I would like to give an overall one takeaway from today, we present one project, but it's not one solution fits all. So here it is, our project, our flagship project, Bremen. It's this light industrial development in Germany, very close to Hamburg. There's a lot of letters here and information, but what I would like to take away from this slide is what could we do with Bremen. So in Bremen, we could do the maximum possible and sensible reduction of embodied carbon. We did interviews with many suppliers. We worked with List Eco. We worked closely with Listbau, the general contractors, with our tenant. We're going to talk a little bit more about the whole value chain in the next slide. But that was what the market was ready to develop, to deploy. That is on the embodied carbon side. And on the last line, we can see on the operational side. We also here are aiming to have a net zero building. I'm talking in future because the practical completion of the building is the summertime by August 2024. It started construction last year in October. And really is looking at maximizing renewable energy on site via solar panels, as well as wind-mounted turbines, wind turbines as mentioned, and the most efficient heat pump that we can find in the market right now with natural refrigerants. I will give you more detail afterwards when we deep dive with List Eco, all the material choices and the life cycle that was performed. Before I give the word to Sebastian, I would like to emphasize once more the value chain, the importance of the value chain. It is, whenever we hear, well, it's a team sport, sounds nice, might be a marketing trend, but it is really true. If you do not have all the players on board, from moment one, the investors, the buy-in of the investors, the willingness to take the time to pay the green premium whenever there is a green premium, to architects, to suppliers and material readiness as well on the market, because what is on paper might not be the full reality when you place the order of that low embodied carbon material. It might not be available in that specific location. You still want to source locally, you want to reduce embodied carbon, you want to be on time, you want your building to be fully insured, you need sustainability consultants to be also bringing that local knowledge, the general contractor to be fully on board and think out of the box with the developer, and you must have the future tenant fully on board, because the ultimate operation and the maintenance of the building will depend on it. Sebastian, the floor is yours.
All right, yeah, thank you for the introduction for this project and about Goodman. So I'd like to mention a few words about who we are and what we do. So we are part of a group of companies called the List Group. So the List Group consists of 4 divisions. Like Rebecca said, our general contractor List Bau is constructing mainly buildings in the logistics sector in Germany, but we also have other divisions which are dealing with the planning controlling of projects, with the development, and our part as List Eco is the technical consultation for more sustainability in projects. So we also do the certification of projects, but one of our core services is, of course, the life cycle assessment. And what I think makes us special that we can combine these services within a project from the consultation to the construction or refurbishment of a project. So yeah, there are many sustainable services in the market which are needed when it comes to sustainable construction. But like I said, one of the main services is, of course, life cycle assessment in combination with calculation rules coming from different certification systems like BREEAM, DGNB, LEED, or other systems. And yeah, that's exactly what we did here or are doing in this project right now. And yeah, I like to start with the process how we use LCA. So first, in early project stages, I think it makes sense when you have no building model yet that you start with the comparison on building component level or building element level. So what we did here is that we compare different systems or variants in the roof, in the facade, in external walls with a reference or baseline scenario, and later in a proceed process we can compare the building or the baseline scenario to our optimized version. So that's what we normally do and what we also did here in the project with Goodman in Bremen. And I think one thing which is super important that we make sure that we compare apple with apple. So before we do any comparison, I think we need to make sure that things like fire protection, statics, building physics, like the U value, are meeting the same requirement. But also we need to make sure that we propose optimization which is affordable and really provide a CO2 saving. So these are the things we need to take into account, that we are not comparing apple with peers. And yeah, this is very important when we run our comparisons. And yeah, like Rebecca said, here in this meeting today, our focus is on the low carbon materials and optimizations we have in local markets. So like I said, here this project is in Germany. So, and these 10 optimization points or variants make sense to look into it. And yeah, I mean, the time is very short today, so we can't look into each of this variant by itself, but one of the option which provides the biggest embodied carbon reduction is, of course, the floor slab or the foundation in a logistic building. So this is the one example I picked for today, where we have as a reference scenario conventional concrete and steel, reinforced steel. And we looked for other manufacturers which provided here low carbon alternatives and also provides EPDs that really gives us numbers for the reduction potential of these materials. But before, I think, like I said, it's super important to check what were the basis of the LCA. So like I said, there are many different calculation rules we could follow. In this example, we followed the levels approach. Then we have a comparison here on building component level. This is not part yet of a full or comprehensive LCA. So we can see here which life cycle models were taken into account based on the 5978 standards. We use generic LCA data sets, but we also use product and project specific EPDs as far as the manufacturer was possible to provide these. And also we set the the service life here in this comparison to 0. So the floor slab, for example, has the same service life as the lifetime of the building. And yeah, I think these are super important also to make sure that we're comparing the same things when we talk about LCA. And yeah, for this example here of the floor slab, we had in the reference scenario, like I said, the steel fiber and conventional concrete for a thickness of 20 centimeters. And we can see per square meter, there are nearly 50 kilograms CO2 per square meter. And with the optimized version, where we could use low carbon steel and low carbon concrete, we could reduce already the floor slab by nearly around 50 percentage. So this has yeah, a very high reduction potential. Oh, it's a little bit fast, sorry. And now if we looking at the software one-click LCA, it really helped us to perform the building component level comparisons, but also if you want to make a deep dive into the data set itself, I think it's great that you can see here where's the up carbon, where's it the carbon coming from. So is it the production stage, is it the transportation stage, or is it the construction phase? So and here one click really also provides experts to make a deep dive. Yeah, and I think also which was really good here is that we can use different calculation tools. So we could compare, or we can switch the calculation tool from levels to Bremen or internal LCA guidance from Goodman. So and this I think really helpful when we used here one-click LCA in the whole process. So I guess Rebecca, this is now your part again.
Yes, thank you, Sebastian. So Sebastian was mentioning there's no time to deep dive on each or every building element, but I believed it was interesting to share because we truly believe on the sharing to really increase knowledge in the market as well as boosting everyone to do their best to reduce. So this is the study level a year ago, overall looking at Goodman specifications. So whenever you're doing your LCAs and comparing your normal practice versus the low carbon practice that might be available, you might come across different building elements CO2 reduction potential. So again, to contextualize, study level a year ago, following U value, thickness, specs, bearing capacity, and all of Goodman specifications in continental Europe. But I thought it would be interesting to really deep dive or to have a high level number on element per element, or at least the most impactful ones. So if we see on the facade warehouse, the potential of reduction would be of around 25%. Then, as we saw before, supporting structure, superstructure and substructure were the most impactful. It's also where we can reduce the most. The second one is the facade supporting structure. So we see around 70% of the office. Then the roof of the warehouse, slab and foundation, and on and on, we can see around 20 and 30% potential reduction. Since we did the study, the market kept on advancing. There were more suppliers available. We could optimize some materials here and there. So the numbers might differ, and we look forward to having the practical completion and the full documentation in place so we can do a final LCA. So we did the design stage LCA, optimize this LCA, iterations throughout the construction, and soon a final LCA, all performed by List Eco with our support and one-click software. So a lot of emphasis has been given on embodied carbon, but we saw operational carbon also has its weight, and there are some good low-hanging fruits and not so low options that we should take into account. So as we said, we maximize solar panels on the roof in Bremen, our flagship project. It's around 300 kilowatt peak. Also working hard. I have my colleagues really trying to push for more innovative solutions and have those wind-mounted wind turbines on the roof, really throughout the facade, up to 7 wind turbines. Then also it's energy storage, so battery ready outside in the external area. It's also 50% of the car parking is EV charged connected. So we have EVCI, the infrastructure connected. It's 100% EV ready. So if there is the need for further connection of infrastructure in the future, as well as we'll have a fast charger, which is also compatible to EV truck charger. My favorite is the heat pump, lover of low carbon heating and cooling. So here we have an air to water heat pump with natural refrigerant. We have propane in this case. Also LED lighting with sensors, daylight and motion, and so on and so forth. Beyond carbon, which sometimes we don't give enough emphasis, but very equally important if we look at biodiversity, water management, waste management, well-being, and etc. So here's some highlights of these building characteristics and specs. So we have rainwater capture and reuse for secondary use. We have wildflowers and 2 insect hotels in the external area. We have also 2 interior green walls in the office space, green roof on the office building, and for well-being purposes, white interior walls in the warehouse. Overall, some important conclusions. Well, we could go on and talk for hours, but I think it's important to leave some space to questions or to discuss. I think definitely the first point it's never too early to start. So whenever you have an idea of project, maybe some stakeholders will say, well, it's too early, it's too early. Well, we came across it's too early until it's actually too late. So it's eventually never too early. Start with at the pre-design, do some high-level LCAs, plug in and plug out some EPDs, talk to suppliers. Definitely never too early to start. Second one for us is that the more you innovate and you want to use materials that have just come out in the market, the less ready will be, out of the shelf EPDs. So hopefully with blockchain and all the innovations that we're having in place, we'll have those EPDs ready faster and faster, but it might not be the case. So because an EPD is not ready yet, I would still encourage the use of such materials because EPDs might not catch up with innovations and we have to deploy those sustainable materials anyway. Third point will be involve our stakeholders as early as possible, so from day one. And for us, the important was insurers because of fire restrictions. You might come across the challenge whenever willing to deploy specific materials, like for example, organic insulation and maximizing timber as well. And on the procurement side, there is a need for prescribing, what you're expecting from service providers. So whenever you're going to tender, prescribe low carbon materials at the procurement stage. It's good to leave room for ideas and for blue sky, but also if you have the knowledge, if you've seen other projects, you came across some lessons learned, I would highly encourage to put them in the tender because it is so much information that is being deployed out there that it doesn't mean that the whole value chain is informed about it. So I would encourage as well to be descriptive and prescriptive as much as possible to push for that low carbon part on your developments. And well, to be continued from Goodman's side, because we were talking about warehouse and office, but we see that data centers are a new challenge. Apologies. In terms of embodied carbon and operational carbon, we're talking about different figures. And I think it's interesting to highlight. I came across a study of data center embodied carbon, in which so we saw before the most impactful parts in the warehouse and office for us in our baseline. We're looking at superstructure, substructure, external areas. Those were the most impactful embodied carbon building elements. Whenever you start looking at data centers, things are very different. Namely, MEP, so mechanical and electrical building elements, will be reaching up to 90% of the full embodied carbon. So whenever you're willing to reduce embodied carbon, perhaps your concrete and steel quantities of your substructure and superstructure won't be able to compete. So you have to aim at reducing that embodied carbon on MEP. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I will maybe take this opportunity to also ask from those of you who are online to take, send in your questions. There's a tab at the bottom where you can do so. So it would be really maybe useful for us as well to know what it is that you want or want to ask specifically, maybe in terms of the project, maybe for something else. And then there is also a poll that has just gone out live, asking if you would like to book a demo with One-Click LCA for any specific needs that you have for any of your projects. So yeah, we are just waiting for any questions that anyone else has. Until then, maybe Sebastian and Rebecca, how, like, since the project is still on its final stages, I guess, for completion, you said in August 2024, if I could ask one question, what would be, let's say, the challenges that, you have come across as well, doing maybe life cycle assessment as a whole so far, or anything that you would like to share in regards to the project?
Yeah, maybe I could start from a technical perspective. So if we work with new materials and innovative materials, it's always hard to get robust LCA data from the manufacturers because they are all in a very early stage. They try, or sometimes they don't even know, at least in our German market, exactly what a EPD is and how to get it. And even in these companies, there's not all the time a sustainability manager who can answer these questions, how it's going to get a EPD. So sometimes we have to work with assumptions or with numbers which are close to what they will have in an EPD later. So that was of course a challenge sometimes. And I think here it was great that One-Click has a, let's say, broad or big international databases where we can sometimes pick another project which is close to a manufactured product where we don't have the final EPD yet. So this was really good. And also the support, if there's not a new EPD already integrated, it was very easy and a fast process to get this EPD into your database so that we can use it here for this project. So, but yeah, this is definitely a challenge that for the new projects, there's not all the time the suitable data set we can use in a LCA.
And happy to also add a challenge more on the delivery of the project, really going from study to implementation and the reality of realizing the project. A key challenge is taking, so there isn't full availability of low embodied carbon materials throughout the whole market. So there are specific facilities in specific locations that will be actually offering that specific low embodied carbon material. So whenever procuring, if you place the order of your materials following a business as usual timing, so you know, well, my typical timing for the sandwich panels delivery is 2 weeks. So well, take that for low embodied carbon materials and innovation, I will also need just 2 weeks for it to be delivered on site. Do not take for granted that those materials should take the same amount of time. It might, but it might not. So we came across one of the materials that we procured and we placed the order. Actually, that specific facility had a delay, nothing major, but it delayed the final delivery 3 weeks. And that was the only facility that was actually deploying and place having that and low embodied carbon solution in the market. So definitely was a lesson learned. Yeah, again, it's never too early until it's too late. Also for placing the order, do not assume that low embodied carbon developments have the same timing for nothing, not from the study to the delivery and placing orders. You avoid those delays because those potentials and options will start just falling on the way, and that would be very unfortunate.
Yep. Okay, I see we have one question. Maybe I'll just go from the bottom up. So the first one from Priscilla would be for you, Rebecca. Do you see much difference among the countries you have in your portfolio in continental Europe in terms of readiness of change? For example, I know that the Italian market is really and still concrete oriented. Are you pushing to innovation also there, accepting that it may come as a higher cost for you as a developer?
That's a very, very good question, and definitely every country, and even within the same country, if you look at the northern and the southern part, that will be applicable to Italy. I see you're based in Italy, the same to Spain and France, and so on and so forth. So we develop and own and manage in 6 countries in Europe: Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Spain, and Italy. And to your question, yes, all markets are very different. And on the concrete, indeed, you see it in Italy and Spain. The reality for structure is full concrete, and it's very aligned, depending obviously which type of services you be having in place. But what I came across is really on what is slowing down innovation is really the standardization. Is really looking at the safety also of whoever will be in those operating those buildings. And what I came across is very high fire restrictions in the south of Europe, and to be able to have those building permits that actually are aligned with those fire restrictions of sometimes 240 minutes we came across in a multi-level in Spain, you can only respond with full concrete. So the norther you go, you see a little bit more flexibility, lower fire restrictions, but again, very service and location specific. But then you can more and more deploy timber and steel structure, and you see that it is possible. And, whenever you look at those type of buildings in the UK, parking and warehouses and offices, they're fully in steel, and so why can't we actually have those more flexible fire restrictions throughout continental Europe? I think it would take some time, but yeah, definitely each market its own has its own beauty. Yeah.
All right. And then we have another one from, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Ilan. So what is asked was, do you have any figures, percentages from your data center projects on what are the embodied carbon shares among MEP and building? Maybe either Sebastian or Rebecca.
Yes, I can share some data. It is very, very early in time because, first of all, there isn't much clarity on embodied carbon in data centers throughout any development. So beyond whatever we develop and others in Europe, in the US, and so on and so forth. Also, I was, in contact with One Click LCA and other. So there is a lack of data. But on that report that I mentioned, I saw up to 90% of the embodied carbon was MEP related. And also running some data for our specifications on data center, I saw it could go down to 70, 60%. It really depends on your assumptions and the calculations. And so here I really encourage, and we're going to do so as well, the more specific you can go with beam data, the better, because otherwise throughout those reports that you can find, there is a lot of assumptions, but I would say between 60 and 90% with the information I have in hand today. But hopefully we can learn more in the coming 1-2 years, and we would be happy to share more information on this.
Yeah, maybe I could add that we also made the experience that technical building equipment is often underestimated in life cycle assessments. I think one reason is that we don't really try or are not able to calculate it in their full detail because there are less data available. It's a huge effort to calculate all the small pieces and parts of the technical building equipment. But there are some good studies, so maybe not for data center, but I know for sure here this study was made for research and laboratory buildings, and this study also shows that the embodied carbon of the technical building equipment is higher than the operational carbon in total, and then the embodied carbon of the building structure. Or so, yeah, I think it's super important to get new data for technical building equipment to be able to include it more into whole building life cycle assessments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it in regards to the questions so far. Maybe one last round of comments or statements from you, Rebecca or Sebastian. Anyway, we also have 7 minutes to the hour as well. So as a summary.
Rebecca, would you like to start?
I can start. Yeah, happy to start. I would like to perhaps make one highlight. Today we were focusing on embodied carbon, reducing and as well as reducing operational carbon, but very, very important to keep in mind, well, sourcing locally. I think that what might be happening is that we have those facilities throughout, well, different countries and regions that will be having that specific and very nice on paper EPD. So we might be willing to start just shipping things throughout the globe to have that ultimate innovation, just to keep in mind, as well as on locally available and what makes sense in that specific building. So with this, just to say, let's start having circularity in mind more and more. And I think what is very interesting on One Click LCA software as well is that you do the life cycle assessment and you can have the BCI, the Building Circularity Index, as well displayed. So I find, and we have started doing such an exercise to, whenever doing a life cycle assessment, playing with different EPDs as well, and paying more and more attention on the Building Circularity Index. So looking beyond at the material level circularity, but also, okay, whenever we're assembling them, in the final product, which is a building, how circular it is. So hard to get high level of circularity, but definitely for us, it's a homework that we're busy with. That would be. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I can just agree to what you said. I would like to highlight that we still need to make progress in the field of knowledge transfer about LCA. We need to get it more into the design process to make it a really standard tool, which is used all the time and not just once. We can see this still a lot in, at least in for the German market, that is not fully implemented now in all the processes. But as you showed us on one of the very first slides, from 2028 on, it will be mandatory for all the buildings in Europe up to 1,000 square meters. So we should get used to it right now. And we should use, at least for the new constructions, more the possibilities or advantages of BIM. So right now, what we can see, BIM is always a special unit than LCA. There are some experts, but maybe there should also be more progress in combining both, and yeah, then also using the potential to visualize the results by color coding BIM models and to show results to non-experts, because it's still a very theoretical topic, and sometimes it really helps to show yeah, embodied carbon hotspots by visualizing them into color codes with the building model. So it's always about to show the results for non-experts and to support decision processes. That's what we want to do here with LCA. And always keep in mind we need to show the costs. So what is the optimization where we have the best potential of yeah, costs and CO2 savings? So this together makes a very powerful decision support. And yeah, I think that's it from my side as well.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much both for summarizing this. We also feel exactly the same way, that both, you know, we not only have to look at data, but it is also important to have cost carbon take a more center stage, and the fact that you have to start looking at how different materials impact what the different choices, or what different choices you make will impact the next parts of your process itself in the project. And that's very crucial also for every stakeholder to understand and know. But thank you so much, both Sebastian and Rebecca, for joining us today, this afternoon, and for sharing about the project from Goodman and from List Eco, and sharing also your insights. Super valuable. I hope this was also valuable as much for everyone that has joined in. And again, thank you everyone also for the questions. And that's it. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.